And I'm a trauma therapist. I'm EMDR certified and I do a lot of trauma work, but I also found that talking about trauma wasn't exactly what most people are thinking of in the things that are challenging us day to day, even if that's how we might kind of scientifically understand it in what's held in our bodies when we go through stress that's either acute stress or stress that's chronic over a long period of time. That's Trauma is not what people are at first thinking of. They're really thinking of their stressors.
Welcome to Whole by Design, the podcast exploring the human experience with compassion and curiosity. Together, we'll uncover powerful internal resources and tools to help you embrace clarity, joy, and your full potential because you are whole by design. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Julie Lopez, and I'm your host for Whole by Design. On this month's episode, we will be diving into the stress equation and how this empowering body of work can actually help you deal with life's challenges and be empowered to manage your stress in the most efficient way. Stay until the end where we're going to actually go into the five benefits. Yes, I said benefits of going through something super stressful and what you can actually benefit from on the other side. Today, I'd like to welcome Amanda Good, who is an incredibly talented clinician. She is the clinical director of the Sibley Group. She does a lot of trainings for peers and others on regulation, and she has a full manuscript of a book called The Stress Equation, which we all hope is going to be coming out really soon. Thank you so much for joining us, Amanda.
Thank you, Julie.
How
Yeah.
did you like that little pressure there?
No, I love it. I would be very excited for that book to be coming out soon. So,
Awesome. Well, I want to just dive right in. I want to hear about what been working on, and specifically have other people hear about how the stress equation works, what it is, and how people can use it in their day-to-day lives.
sure. So I'm really excited to talk about the stress equation. This idea came up for me during the pandemic because I was getting so many referrals with people who were just very overwhelmed and experiencing stress more intensely and going through a lot of kind of collective trauma at that point. And so I started thinking more deeply about how stress impacts us differently and how we all process it. Um,
We
and
are.
also thinking about how I conceptualize my cases with clients and how I help people understand what stress is doing in their bodies and what's working or not working. And I got to a point where I was like, if I could actually break this down into a conceptual model that anybody can use, so not just in therapy, but a formula for understanding stress and realizing that it can be beneficial for us to have some amount of stress, but that it's when it gets really imbalanced that it becomes a problem for us. So being able to understand your stress, understand balance or imbalance, and then know where to target to be able to change that and start healing from chronic patterns of stress. That I was able to flesh out this equation for people to be able to figure out themselves and then be able to use it as maintenance, not just therapy.
I love that. And this whole podcast is about empowering listeners. It's about making things more accessible to the everyday person who's walking
Yeah.
around living this human experience. And what a time that was. COVID, so much loss, so many
Yeah.
things that got shut down. And I love how it inspired you to make what you were studying and really diving into on a clinical level more accessible for people to feel empowered in their lives, especially as it relates to stress.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a trauma therapist. I'm EMDR certified and I do a lot of trauma work, but I also found that talking about trauma wasn't exactly what most people are thinking of in the things that are challenging us day to day, even if that's how we might kind of scientifically understand it in what's held in our bodies when we go through stress that's either acute stress or stress that's chronic over a long period of time. that's trauma is not what people are at first thinking of. They're really thinking of their stressors. So
Right.
the equation describes it that way.
I love that because I do think, as a former trauma therapist myself, you say the word trauma and people think of
It's
war
off-putting.
or fire or violence in a significant way.
Yeah.
Of course it is, but I think you're talking about the human system and
Yeah.
its response to things that are less than ideal, of which we have a ton of them, right? They're on a
Yes.
continuum.
Yeah.
And we know that stress has been coined the silent killer because it
Mhm.
wreaks such havoc on our physical body. Yeah, right.
Yes.
Aura rings are all the rage. Everyone's watching the way their body's responding to the everyday stressors that people experience, from the big to the small.
Right. Yeah. And really it's the chronic stressors that a lot of clients come to me that have a lot of skills for managing much of the stress in their life, but they're doing so much managing and it's coming at a cost. They're not really healing whatever the underlying cause is. And if you're constantly, exercising or doing yoga or doing all the coping skills to be able to manage these, feelings that keep coming up routinely, um, then you're going to eventually burn yourself out. If that imbalance persists over time, then you burn out. So we want skills to balance not just for the moment, but really like from the bottom up to like fully heal from whatever is causing that stress.
I love that. And you're saying a bunch of things that are really interesting. So I think that the empowerment piece around this stress equation would lead us right to this place of saying, what is the stress equation? And I actually even heard you saying something about coping tools. And I
Yeah,
know you distinguish your equation from just coping tools because there's
yeah,
actually, I think, a lot of different levers that can be
yeah.
part of your equation. So tell me about that.
Absolutely. So the equation looks at someone's level of stress, which again, it's a continuum and it's not a negative thing. We can be at a high level of stress and that can be kind of driving us to a good goal. So it's not necessarily like a good or bad. It's just understanding what level of stress we're at. But that the formula for showing us our stress level is it's the relationship between the demands on us and our capacity for meeting those demands.
Okay.
And so this
Wait,
is,
so hold on just a second.
Mhm.
So, like,
Yeah,
following along. So, demands are high, coping is low. Maybe that becomes a crisis point. What do we see when that happens?
right,
Demands high, coping low.
right. So if we're not able to meet all those demands, then that's an imbalance. And we're functioning at an imbalance for a while. Well, there's two things. One is that can just cause overwhelm, or the
Yeah.
other is it's if you think of like allostatic load, if you hold up a like something like your cup of water, okay, that's not a significant demand, but over time it starts getting heavier and heavier and heavier on you, and it starts to cause strain. And so that imbalance over time can cause strain or more of those like physical symptoms like you were talking about where stress starts to really impact us in our bodies. So we can feel that more like acute, like emotional overwhelm, or just starting to have all these side effects of stress over time if we're at a constant imbalance of these demands on us and what our capacity is to meet them.
So, how about some examples of things physically that you might experience if the demand is high and the capacity is low and you used the cup? I was going to pull up this candle, which is amazing, by the way. It smells so good. But holding the candle, I hold it for a while. At some point, if I'm holding this imbalance for a while, I'm going to give out. Like my
Right.
system's going to give out. So, I was
Yeah.
thinking kind of the parallels
Yeah.
emotionally, right? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Become
Well, and that's a good
psychotic, you
example.
become
Yeah.
comatose, you become severely
Yeah.
depressed, you have a panic attack. Like, what's the break look like physically?
Yeah.
The break look like a heart attack, a stroke, like
It
you
can be a
know,
lot of different things. And I think part of that is because we hold our emotions in different places in our bodies. So I have I would say a majority of my clients, as far as physical symptoms go, will either come to me with chronic headaches, or like upper GI. So it's like chest upward physical symptoms,
Yeah.
where they are holding a lot of tension in the upper part of their body. And so chronic headaches or migraine, um, difficulty focusing, difficulty with memory, a lot of that can be an impact of stress and not necessarily a diagnosis of its own. Or nausea, chest tightness, that quick breathing that comes with more anxiety.
Yes.
Or I see more lower GI issues. I have so many clients who have IBS
Yes.
because when we're in a
Tell us
chronic
what IBS
state,
is. Irritable
um,
bowel syndrome. I'm trying
yes.
to keep everyone on the yes.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people listening might, really resonate with that because it's so common. And having chronic, constipation or bowel issues is actually not how our bodies should be working.
That's right.
But because of chronic inflammation that can come from being chronically in a stressed state, at that point, your body is just working to keep up with your demands. It's not working to just do your regular healthy functioning. So things get thrown off. But yeah, over time it can contribute to other more serious things too, like heart issues and all kinds of health problems. Emotionally, stress that piles up over time can lead to different anxiety disorders or mood disorders. And anxiety, as it becomes more acute over time, can also turn into like panic or phobias or OCD, because again, you're just trying to come up with ways to compensate for the demands just feeling more and more crushing
Right.
rather than figuring out how to balance it out.
Yes, so tell me about that, right? I think one of the things I love about this is that you talk about different ways to change the equation. It's not a one
Yeah.
size fits all. Every
Yeah.
person's unique, every situation's unique, every scenario is unique, and that you are,
Yes.
rather than being prescriptive, like do this thing, you're like, let me teach you this model so you can decide or figure out what's happening and then do these things for yourself. So tell me a little
Yeah.
bit more about that.
So, in thinking about the capacity part of the equation, like how you're able to manage all of these demands, um, that really depends on a lot of things because each of us has different strengths and different resources. But also, if you think about what your goals are, the way that you want to handle your demands or the amount of demands you're okay with is going to be very different. And I sort of think about it like if I worked with an athletic trainer. So I was doing workouts with a trainer. They wanted to know what my like exercise goal was before we started trying to build muscle or build endurance. Was I going for speed? Was I trying to run a marathon? Was I, trying to like get really buff, or was I just trying to lose weight? The different goals are going to mean very different skill building and attention to different parts of an exercise routine, and very different exercises or practices that would go into it. And so, depending on what somebody is looking to work on or looking to heal or what is of value to them, building capacity could look different. So, I break capacity down. So, your ability to deal with stress in your life can come from having good skills for meeting the demands on you. And skills can be like or if you have a job that has a lot of varying demands, task related demands, then your organizational skills are super important and that's going to reduce your overwhelm. But most of what I'm talking about is coping skills, is, what we can learn in therapy as far as mindfulness skills and deep breathing and emotion regulation. And this is what people first think of for managing stress. But then there's also our internal beliefs. And that is something that, working with implicit memory can really shape our experience of stress and our approach and how we're even using our skills or not using them. That mindset, if you want to think of it that way, just influences everything. And
Yeah.
so sometimes we pinpoint, okay, that's where we really need to do our work. And then the third area is supports, and that can be relationships. It can also be other resources or accommodations that we need to put in place to manage our demands better.
Okay, cool. So there's these different ways that you can increase your resiliency, which is the
Yeah,
bottom part of the equation.
yeah,
How about what are the ways to reduce demands? And that can be really hard in our culture or in our ambitious, industrious
totally.
that we live in.
Totally. I think especially practicing in the DC area with a lot of my clients, the idea of taking certain demands off of our plate or kind of shifting our expectations of how much we should be doing, that's a tough sell. So sometimes it's just about recognizing how to focus ourselves and kind of pick where our energy goes so that it feels like our values are really dictating where we're spending the bulk of our time and we're choosing the demands for ourselves. That's actually going to make those demands feel a lot different right off the bat.
When they're innately inspired, when they're authentic.
Right, right. This is in service of things that are within my values, my goals. There's an outcome that I'm really connected with, and so it feels less of a demand just right there. So that's a way we reduce some of our demands. But the other piece of it is recognizing what's in there that doesn't need to be.
Mm.
So some of that is I work with a lot of moms on figuring out what like what kind of roles at home or tasks they have at home that they can take off their plate. Either having a partner do it, having the kids start doing more, or recognizing that there's a lot of internal pressure that we put on ourselves as moms that maybe those things don't all have to happen and we can pick and choose a bit. Um, and then there's the less conscious stuff. I feel like a good popular term for it would be emotional baggage. The stuff that we're carrying around and it does weigh on us and it makes everything a little bit harder and heavier and it makes your arm give out faster holding the candle because you're
Right.
always kind of holding on to it. So
Even if
this
you're not
is
consciously aware of it, right?
yeah, yeah, all that stuff that we haven't worked through and we don't always have to. Like it might not actually be relevant to bring out old stuff and work through it, but sometimes it is if it keeps being the reason why we're stuck.
Well, you said you work with a lot of moms. I work with a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs. And believe it or not, reducing demands can often be about delegating or
Yes.
control, like being willing to let go of something in
Mhm.
service of personal well-being and also opportunities for other people's
Yes.
growth. But it's not always so easy, depending
So
on what the unconscious factors are.
I actually have a portion of my book where I talk about writing down what all your daily tasks are. So, like a list of all the things that you do in the day and taking a look at it and putting color coding. You got three choices. If there's anything that you can code in there to delay, delete, or delegate.
Oh my God, I love that. Delayed.
Because sometimes we'll look at that list and be like, I don't need to be doing this. Why am I doing this task that I really don't even care if that happens or not? Or I could give this to my assistant.
Yeah,
Or this is important to me, but it's not urgent. It can wait until next week. And then that's one less thing today for me to be worried about.
I love that. So that's a great way to change the top of the equation.
Yeah.
I hope you get that book out there, Amanda, because I'm
Thank
so
you.
excited to read it. And I actually think a lot of people need to be reading it, especially right now. The
Yeah.
history continues to have challenges to it, and our communities have challenges, and people have, life's not perfect, and crappy stuff happens all the time. And having tools that you can use in the midst of it feels really important right now, more than ever, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, having tools that you can use and also feeling like you know what tools to go to. I feel like that's what's tough, especially now that we have such a wealth of information on the internet. So people can look up all kinds of therapy skills and really learn a lot online now or just on TikTok, right? But knowing kind of for you what is the best thing to use at what time and why, I think that's so important.
For sure. It sounds amazing. So, just a question for you. I know that writing a book is a ton of work. It was a ton of work for me. And my personal book was driven by a very personal experience, which is that, I was given away as a baby and lived for the first few months in an orphanage. And then that early experience really informed a lot of the way my nervous system was built and how I was coping with life, unconscious to me. And like me, other people in my demographic, adopted people, people who go through foster care, or frankly, any person who's been abandoned in their life by parents who aren't around in whatever ways, even if they're there physically, can have all kinds of factors that are impacting them and they don't know it. So
Yes.
it was a
Yeah.
personal driver that got me to the finish line of publishing my book about implicit memory, this unconscious way that our body holds data. That, of course, the main message is that we can move and change, that we have all these tools in the present day where we can access the unknown to move it and change symptoms. So I'm just wondering in your book, which I know is mostly done, you're just tweaking it for too long, in my opinion. What on a
Yeah.
personal level kind of drove your investment in the stress equation?
A couple of different things. I think earlier on when I was writing it, I sort of came to a realization about certain messages that I had grown up with, just like you did. And for me, a lot of that was having ADHD and being in the private schools in DC and just feeling like my worth was so tied to my achievement and this
Mm,
go, go, go kind of drive that I had all the time. And over time, just recognizing the toll of all of that stress that I was putting on myself and how it was affecting my mental health, how it was affecting my body, how it was affecting my relationships. Just that kind of level of stress that I kind of added to things that were already maybe a bit harder for me going through school.
mm,
And so the more that I kind of understood that about myself, the more I was interested in writing about stress. And then what actually was the kind of getting me to the finish line of writing the book was going through the experience of having cancer,
mm,
and my treatment experience with cancer, which generally you would think of as a trauma, and I guess objectively speaking would be a trauma in my life. Um, but because of all of the work that I've done in figuring out how to balance how I meet all of my demands, how I balance my own equation, I was really, really clear-minded about how I wanted to navigate this really difficult period of my life. So there were demands that were going to be on my plate where I was like, I'm going to be extremely tired. I'm going to be going through surgeries. Like these are things on that top half of the equation that are going to be stressful and hard, and are not negotiable. I can't delete or delay or delegate any of that.
right.
But it made it really clear for me if I'm going to increase my capacity to manage all of that, then I have to look at where I'm spending my energy and what's most important and just be very, very deliberate about how I spend my time and my energy and how I take care of myself. And so I remember very distinctly right after I got diagnosed, just being like, how do I want to go through this? It
Mm,
wasn't it wasn't panic. It was just like a game plan of like, who do I want to be going through this challenge? Um, and the biggest thing for me was actually my sports. I was like, if I have everybody do everything else that I need, and then I can just focus my energy on being well, then I can do this. I've got the childcare, I got the babysitters, I got a meal train. I have never asked for so much help on so many things, but it meant that I didn't have to worry about anything. And
So good.
so,
And it's so inspiring, Amanda. Oh,
thanks. Yeah, no, and I really, I mean, I'm very lucky, but I got through that like, you know, with relative ease, all things considered. Um, and and really feeling very empowered. Like, wow, I'm so strong that I can get through all of that. Um, I do feel like I experienced this growth from going through that experience of my cancer treatment and kind of staying ahead of the stress of it. Um, and I feel kind of in a weird way, I feel grateful for a lot of what I got out of that. And I finished my book while I was off of work, and I was like, well, I have some time on my hands, and I'm feeling really inspired by what I've experienced. And so that was when I actually finished writing.
amazing and inspiring. And yes, I am so
Thanks.
glad you're on the other side, but it sounds like
Thank
some of
you.
your struggle really helped birth this great piece of work that I think is going to help so many people. So you're not going to believe
So,
it, but we're at that time, and it's almost like a perfect lead in to hear about the five categories of benefit that you and anyone can actually get from healing stressful things or healing their
yeah.
stress equation.
And this is sort of my favorite part in the therapy process too, is once people feel like that click when things start to feel more balanced, or they really feel like they understand how to be managing and maintaining things on their own. And I certainly felt it. There was a theory from the 90s. I didn't come up with this myself, but some research that went into post-traumatic growth.
Mm.
But I think that this is broader than just what people experience after trauma. It's really the benefits that we get from having gone through something stressful, and then seeing that we could do it. So if we get through it and we felt like we handled it well, then there are all these benefits. And so it's not just that you've built up more resilience or grit. Um, it's also that a lot of people will experience a greater appreciation of life. So that was one of the categories, is just feeling this renewed sense of gratitude and appreciation of things around you. And I certainly feel that, like going to a doctor's office and sitting there waiting an hour and just being like, this receptionist is so sweet. She keeps checking in on I just like, but like really just genuinely seeing good in things. And then what I talked about before, the second aspect, that personal strength, like really feeling like you found this strength in yourself when you had to dig deep. And if so, that's why I say stress isn't all bad. Like having some level of stress does get us to dig deep and uncover that strength. Um, New possibilities in life. So maybe a piece of that is my book. But I think also if you're thinking about working with leaders, recognizing kind of what we can set our sights on once you realize what you could get through, um, internally or personally. Closer relationships. So the connections that you build with people because you're more connected with yourself once you've healed your stress. And the last one being spiritual change, which I also resonate a lot with. Just even if that's not necessarily connection to a higher power, just feeling a deeper sense of meaning in your own life or purpose in your own life.
I love that. Oh my gosh, I love that. All five of them. They're really beautiful and magical. And of course, no one wishes these hard, stressful things on anyone, themselves or their loved ones. But knowing that getting through hard things like that and coming out on the other side can lead to these five important
Mhm.
areas of growth, I think is really,
Yeah.
really beautiful. So,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's very encouraging. Yeah, thinking about having a breakthrough instead of thinking about what it feels like getting there.
100%. So I want to thank you for joining me on this episode of Whole by Design. I hope it left you feeling inspired to toss out labels, embrace new perspectives, and take one step closer to the joy and clarity that is waiting for you as you balance out your stress equation. As always, visit www.vivapartnership.com to access our free and low-cost resources that will empower you and your loved ones on health and well-being. Let's spread the message. Subscribe, review, or share this episode with someone who could benefit from a stigma-dropping approach to mental fitness today.